What's good, you guys? The following podcast contains one of the smartest spiritual conversations that you'll ever come across. I'm going to take concepts from spirituality and compare it to proven scientific concepts, more specifically, proven quantum physics concepts. If you're new to both spirituality or quantum physics, don't worry about it. We're going to explain everything in a very basic format, so you'll get it easily. The guest joining me in today's podcast is Mr. Abhijit Pradhan. He's one of the most learned men in India. He's one of the most well-read men. He's one of India's top career coaches as well as one of India's top corporate coaches. He's got a flourishing entrepreneurial career, but on the side, he also likes studying about all these crazy subjects. He's going to be on the podcast a lot in the future. This is our first episode with Abhijit. Enjoy yourselves. The goal with Monkey Chat is called ICO, that's Intelligent Conversations Only. I've got one of my most intelligent friends in the house today, Mr. Abhijit Pradhan. He's one of India's biggest personal coaches as well as one of India's biggest corporate coaches. But for me, he's actually the most well-read person I've ever come across. He's also got a spiritual side, which is as strong as his business side. So Abhijit, is that like introduction all right?
I mean, a lot of pressure, but yeah.
How would you introduce yourself?
I think for me, it's all about passion and perspective.
Okay.
So for me, everything has to have some element of intrigue, mystery for me to explore and then try and find a point of view, the perspective, which suddenly makes me enjoy it far more than what maybe most would be doing. So that's really my biggest kick in life.
You're also one of those people who goes really deep into subjects. Like, I've never met anyone who goes as deep into subjects as you do.
Massive complaint from my wife. She can't handle it. She's like, no, I can't handle this intensity of exploration.
I feel you. I feel it. So again, for the YouTube channel, I think it's a job requirement for me to go deep into things. So when I heard your podcast with Vishal Gundal, so actually, like, that's what struck me about it. I was like, okay, he's another freak like me. So speaking about being freaky, the subject for today's podcast is spirituality versus science. You've got a spiritual past as well. You're someone who's practiced Reiki, you've practiced meditations.
Sure.
You're also one of the most logical people. You're someone who studied quantum physics. And one of the most interesting conversations I ever had in my life was this conversation with you, where you compared aspects of spirituality to concepts from quantum physics.
Yeah.
Let's get to that later in the podcast.
Sure.
First, I want to ask you, man, you had like a difficult past. You've dealt with gout, you've dealt with anxiety, mental health issues, things like that. And you told me that spirituality, exercise, things like that had helped you come out of it. So could you just like run us through what had happened super quick?
Sure. So I think throughout my life as a school kid, I was always into science. So for me, it was so I've never been into God or religion per se. It was always about science. And there was a time, I think, in my career where I was facing gout, like you mentioned, and my health was on a total downward spiral. I had taken a lot of steps, which is cut out alcohol, cut out smoking and all of that, but somehow gout persisted. So I was like very frustrated, saying that, I'm doing it all, I'm kind of managing my diet, health, everything. How is it that this continues to come back? And for those who don't know, gout is uric acid levels going up, and they go so high that they kind of crystallize
in your body,
in joints, and they become super painful. So you can't even walk, etc., etc. Painkillers don't work. It's really, really bad. So anyway, so that used to keep coming back, and someone just said, hey, you've been through this, you've tried it all, maybe, why don't you try Reiki? I was like, I think I've reached this kind of bottom end, in life, that why not? So I think I got into it. And so, I really believe that rather than just react to the outside shape or what that spirituality is all about, I think for me, I just connected with the essence of it, and that worked for me.
Which was? What is the essence of it?
So what I think I took out immediately was that a lot of my issues were not just medical, but they were things that I'd suppressed throughout my life.
Like emotions.
Absolutely. So those things were still there. I had never technically dealt with them, thinking that time is the greatest healer. So I think that journey essentially got me to realize and accept that, hey, hang on, we don't necessarily have a process of dealing with it. And that entire journey that I went through allowed me to understand how I could deal with it. And that gave me a lot of empowerment and hope. And initially, I for me, it's like this. When I believe in exploring something, I go full on.
Yeah.
Then it's like full surrender. There is no doubt or suspicion or whatever. It's like, let me just take it on 100% and then see where it goes. So that's what happened. And the funny part of this is that maybe for almost a year, I just went so spiritual that again, it scared my wife and everyone around me. It's like, what the hell's happened to this guy? You know, using language like love and all that, which was maybe alien, right? But as that happened, I suddenly started seeing similarities with science again. And that's where I started realizing that, hang on, this wasn't like a totally different exploration or a journey, which is totally kind of, unconnected with whatever I've been doing. But it actually kind of became like a full circle for me. 100%. I was like, oh, hang on. Oh, okay. So this is this and that is that. And these are not this versus that.
Yeah.
And
They
I
actually
think
connected.
They connected beautifully on their own. Like the whole Steve Jobs thing. The dots will connect. And that's what actually happened.
So do you kind of feel that Western thought has kind of taken over all of the world, where unless there's a Western scientific proof about something, people just don't buy it anymore? Like, they've not taken into consideration the possibility that, wait, the Eastern world might have discovered things before. Maybe it's lost over time. And now the Western world is discovering things like pranayama and meditation and attaching scientific research to that. Now, like, abhi theek hai. Now it works. Do you see that happening a lot more? Because from my learnings of spirituality and my learnings of the parallels between biology and spirituality, I feel that there's a lot for the scientific world to discover.
Absolutely.
Like the Western world to discover from the East.
Absolutely. So I think, to me, ultimately, it's a journey of harmony and alignment, right? And like I said, I don't think this is about science or spirituality. It's ultimately how they support each other.
Yeah.
And if science allows you to experience spirituality better, so be it, and vice versa. So I think today, in fact, it's a funny thing, right? The Western world is now discovering the Eastern, and the Eastern world is saying, maybe we didn't focus too much on the science bit, but hey, there is another way of doing it. So I think, to me, there's a convergence happening.
For example, let's just talk about Reiki, because that's something both you and me have done. There's no scientific proof behind Reiki. Okay, wait, hold on. Let's give you guys a kind of context on what Reiki is. So basically, Reiki is touch healing. So say you're injured in a particular part, someone will conduct a Reiki session over that particular part of your body and related parts that are also injured and kind of heal you through that touch. Now, there's not scientific proof behind this, but you've experienced Reiki, I've experienced Reiki. What you feel is actually real. And this is something only a Reiki practitioner will be able to vouch for. Now, the science of it, according to me, and there's no proof behind this, but is that when I'm touching your knee, say, like, your knee is injured, I'm sending out some kind of electromagnetic waves from my own body into your knees, and that's kind of helping with the healing. And the reason I've kind of drawn this conclusion is because when I had a tennis elbow, when I went to my physio, they gave me like these, I think they put a machine, I don't know what it's called, but they basically send electric waves on your injured part. And that had actually helped my tennis elbow, that made it heal. But it hadn't healed completely, and that's why I had gone for Reiki, where someone recommended, why don't you try this alternative healing method? And Reiki was the thing that actually kind of fixed my tennis elbow back then. And that's when I started buying it. I was like, okay, wait, there's some science to this, even if there's no scientific proof, because I physically felt the healing inside me. Similarly, in Reiki, then, I mean, you're administering Reiki to injured body parts and all that, but you're also administering Reiki to what we call the chakras. Which are like key points on your cerebrospinal axis. Like on the straight line that bisects your body in half, there are some key organs, key glands, and Reiki is even administered to key points on that axis. So that's basically the introduction to Reiki. I want to ask Abhijit, what was your whole experience of something like Reiki, and what did it add to your life? What value did it add? Because you're a very successful businessman, entrepreneur, one of the most well-read scientific human beings I've ever come across in my life, but you have dealt with something, say, non-scientific like Reiki.
Sure. So, actually, I must go one step back. When I went in my health transformation journey, I actually got on to the journey of discovering Osho.
Oh, wow.
So, Osho actually happened before Reiki.
Okay.
So, and I think he helped me bridge the two worlds, the logical and, let's say, the total mystical and the spiritual bit. So, that was like let's say, step one. And when I got into Reiki, it kind of just synced very well in that. So for me, Reiki was number one, this whole acceptance that there is energy, and do you allow energy or do you kind of hold on to it, block it? So the Reiki journey was really about I can let energy flow through me and it can do good, not just for me, for others as well. So I think that was a great kind of, realization.
Can you explain the same paragraph to a skeptic who's like listening to this and he's like, what is this energy that Abhijit's speaking about?
So, okay, forget about the spirituality part of it. It's like this. You go into a room and people say, I feel a good vibe, right? So sometimes the vibe can be hostile. Sometimes the vibe can be very friendly and welcoming and warm, etc. What is it? What is all that, right? So essentially, we are antenna. If we just look at ourselves as antenna, we are sensing something. Now, we may not be able to kind of pinpoint this is, this is a ear and this, gets in audio waves, etc., etc. But what is that? And just because we don't have a definition for it or a paradigm to define it or
scientific
yeah,
proof.
exactly, we dismiss it.
Yes.
We dismiss it as soft stuff. Or that's not absolutely, that's not real. But and it's not just about being in the same room. For example, you think of someone and someone just calls you. Now what's going on? Is it a coincidence, as we call, we like to call it and all that, but there's something at play here. And I don't know when we're supposed to jump into quantum physics, but
I was about to jump into quantum physics.
But there is this principle called entanglement. Yeah, what does that basically mean? It means that when two electrons they interact with each other.
Electrons are like the smaller parts of an atom. Like atom consists of like 3 parts: protons, neutrons, and electrons. So electrons are like the tiniest kind of brick that builds the house, which we call an atom.
So the electrons are the ones which are like rotating around this atom, which is really tiny. Yeah. And electrons, when they, let's say 2 electrons, when they interact with each other, they suddenly connect. And even if they are separated and one electron is in Alaska and the other one is in Himalayas or whatever.
Like if you're able to separate them.
Yeah. So if like they've met, they've interacted, and then they get separated for whatever reason, what happens to electron A happens simultaneously to electron B.
Like soulmates.
And that's called entanglement.
Oh, okay.
And it's a quantum physics thing. So this has been proven by scientific experiments, etc. So when you think of that same thing of, hey, I thought of someone, and that person connect, something is getting communicated.
100%.
Right? So in the science world, they could call it a 0-point field. Something exists, and we are essentially, we may not see it, it may be invisible, and they could be electrons, they could be particles, they could be waves or whatever, but something allows us to detect, feel something instantaneously.
100%.
And that's what fascinated me about the quantum physics world.
Okay, so we're going to get back into quantum physics in detail. I just want to bring up this one point that I learned from Sadhguru actually. He has this theory that your entire body, when you break it down, it's just a lot of memory put together. As in, the nose on your face is actually your great grandfather's nose, which has been passed on to you. Okay, so that's one aspect of memory. Similarly, if say, you've gone through some pain in life, that mental memory gets stored in your head. So there's different levels of memory. There's physical memory, mental memory, and then spiritual memory, emotional memory, all that. Also, if I just like rub your knee, I don't know if this is correct, but some of the electrons on my skin may be sticking to like your knee. Therefore, now they're a part of your body. So we have exchanged information. Now that person who you were calling, who called you back, like you thought of the person and then they called you back, could have been someone who's close to you, who you had physical intimacy with, who you had mental intimacy with, emotional intimacy with. So would you say that there's some parallels here?
Absolutely.
Like memories get exchanged?
Absolutely.
That's why they also say that it's important for a parent to touch a child while growing up. That you're passing on a lot of your own memory. So this is the spiritual side of it, but you're someone who's bringing in the physics of it, the quantum physics of it.
Absolutely. So in fact, this whole thing we say that we are a system of energy. So while I was deep diving, when I got into that entire space, there's another body of knowledge, etc., which really looks at it not just as energy systems, but literally code, information code. So there's a code field around you. And when we're not well or we're not feeling good, things have gotten wrong in that code. Just like, let's say, in a computer system, you have, a program is a bug or something like that. So essentially, it's about getting that code back in play, which is healing. So it's really about understanding it from that perspective.
So could Reiki be some form of like a electronic impulse that heals that code?
Sure.
Okay. Now coming back to quantum physics, you had told me one very beautiful story about 2001 when the World Trade Center attacks had happened. Could you just like share it with the viewers? Because this kind of blew me away and I'm sure it'll blow them away as well.
So I got into this rabbit hole of quantum physics from this documentary called What the Bleep Do We Know?
Okay.
So what the bleep do we know is really about, hey, we look at the world from one perspective and see the quantum physics world is a very intriguing, fascinating world which frustrated the likes of Albert Einstein. Because whatever he could measure, prove in the normal atomic world, he says everything goes topsy-turvy in the subatomic world.
Like when you go deeper into an atom, when you magnify it.
So it's like everything before you get into the atom part is structured, everything is sane, orderly. The moment you go into the subatomic world, it's all chaos.
Okay, hold on. Can you just like give the viewers and the listeners an intro on what does quantum physics mean? Like what is the meaning of quantum physics? Is it physics that deals with this smaller world?
Yes, it is the study of the subatomic world.
Okay.
Yeah. So compounds, like for example, this you can see is a knee. Yeah. So this is from the normal world. Yeah. But actually, when you go into the atomic part of it, which is very difficult to see, right? You may not even see anything close to a knee. It's just energy interacting with each other. That's what an atom really is. It's energy. That's it. So the one beautiful part of quantum physics is that electrons can exist in two states. Okay, one as a particle, and that particle is what, let's say, allows this knee to exist and to be seen.
Yeah.
Or it can also exist in the form of a wave.
Yeah.
Okay, what does that mean?
The dual nature of
Possibility.
Yeah.
And it says that only when there's a tension on this wave does it transform into a particle. So again, when you look at from a spiritual perspective, you have this thing that attention, intention on something creates reality.
manifestation.
Absolutely. It's really about that. So otherwise it's all possibility, but only when there's consciousness which kind of gets diverted towards that does it become, like you said, manifested reality. So that's the quantum physics world. So I started because of that documentary, and if anyone can watch that, that's a beautiful primer.
What's it called again?
What the bleep do we know?
Got it.
Yeah, with the full asterisks, etc. of the bleep. Yeah, and so it actually kind of, it's not just about science or whatever. It's really about life, and it's trying to kind of decode life from this extremely subatomic perspective. Okay, so that got me into this journey because there were various people who had gotten interviewed in that documentary, and I started kind of studying each one of them. And one of those people, Lynn McTaggart, I think she was called, she's written a couple of books, and one of the books, so one book is called The Field, which really explains how that entanglement or how we're able to sense people, subconsciously, etc. happens. And the second book was The Intention Experiment.
Okay.
And the intention experiment is that there are institutes, very scientific institutes like Princeton, for example, which has been measuring quantum physics effects for the last, let's say, 30 plus years.
All over the world?
All over the world. And they have installed these devices which essentially measure whether the energy is a particle or a wave.
Okay.
So when nothing is going on, there is no stimuli, it's a wave. When there is attention, when people, let's say, are gravitating towards something, that transforms into a particle, and those devices detect that.
Okay. So hold on, let me like break
Yeah.
this down for the layman. Basically, there are these tiny particles which have a dual nature. They can be both, say, light waves, or they can be a particle.
Absolutely.
So normally they're light, but when you focus on them, they become a real particle when you actually look at them. Say, for example, would a star be a version of this? Like, it's actually light. It's the light from the sun, but when you're looking at it, it looks like a solid object. Is it like a version of that?
Actually, everything, including a star, a planet, is built up of these atoms.
Yeah.
So the DNA of life are these atoms which behave this way.
So everything around you is
Absolutely.
also has a dual nature. I look at you right now, and there's a physical Abhijit,
Yeah.
but then actually you are light.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's like this, if you look at it from a philosophical point of view, without context, content has no value. Similarly, in a subatomic perspective, without attention or energy or involvement and participation, there is no particle.
Wow. Got it.
Right? And then you would say that, hang on, if I'm not thinking of a chair, how can the rest of the world see it as a chair? It's because there's also collective energy.
Got it.
So, you've heard of psychology, like this whole thing of the collective consciousness from Carl Jung and all of that.
Yeah.
So, there is also an effect of not just individual attention, but a group actually creating attention and that reality manifesting. So that the 9/11 example that you brought up from that book, The Intention Experiment, that I was just referring to earlier, talked about 5 hours before that event happened. The devices that I mentioned across the world picked up a massive surge of change in energy
Wow.
5 hours before the event, which meant that something was alerting our subconscious systems
Yeah.
before the event. Just think about it. There are times when you feel, oh my God, something's going to happen, and it actually happens. What is that? Is it just about, oh my God, this guy is woo-woo, or he's blessed with some major mystical powers, or maybe he's just tuned in.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a question of how tuned in are you to the energy field or not.
Got it. And this is what people call intuition, your sixth sense.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I think from a coach perspective, I think it's also important to realize that everyone has it. It's just a question of tuning in. You might think that, oh, he can do it, I can't, he has fantastic intuition, I don't, which honestly is bullshit. Because it's really about helping. So I was tuned out. It's that the Reiki journey actually helped me tune in.
Yeah, 100%.
And that's what I, so realized.
So, I usually ask people what kind of a role their spirituality has played in their careers. And obviously, I'm going to ask you the same. But you're also a career coach. Like, you actually tell people how to make their career more efficient, how they can make more money, how they can become bigger in their careers. So, what is your whole take on the process of spirituality or becoming spiritual in your career journey? What kind of tools can it give you? What are, the weapons that it can put in your hand?
So, the first one is awareness. So, we are on this hamster wheel, this treadmill of life, that pace keeps, just going on and on and on and on, and we get scared to get off it. Saying that, oh my God, if I get off it, I will lose out. Versus the journey of spirituality actually starts putting in that pause between stimulus and response, awareness. And I think awareness is a tool which is not taught.
As a self-awareness.
Yes.
Being aware of who you
To
are.
start with self. And self-awareness is the toughest, actually. Because it's kind of okay and normal to see someone else and, make a comment on it. But to really see yourself needs you to pull back. Because you also have a assumption about yourself. And that assumption could come from what others say about you.
Like a version of yourself in your head.
Absolutely.
You think you're one person, but you may not be that person.
Absolutely. Or there could be different dimensions which you have not realized. There could be a lot of programming that has led you to believe who you are, etc., etc. But have you really pulled back and say, okay, hang on. What is it really about me? Who am I? And what makes me tick, click, with the world,
What keeps
etc.
you motivated about life?
Absolutely. So once I know that, and when you ask this question about how does that help in the career progression, is really about, this is what works for me. This is what happens to me when I get challenged. And this is what, if I do this, can help me overcome it.
Got it.
So I think that to me is a very important part of it, because what is spirituality? To me, it's exercising. You go to a gym, you're essentially you're stressing a system to get stronger and stronger. You're kind of putting inputs of stress so that your body and your system responds better. So to me, spirituality has to play that role. It's your life gym, which kind of helps you, okay, hang on. Now, how do I get even more resilient, more resilient, more resilient, more intuitive, more listening as opposed to just reacting?
Yeah, talking, giving out thoughts,
Absolutely.
things like that.
Yeah.
Now, I read a lot about spirituality. I only read two things, which is business and spirituality, and those are the only two kind of escapisms for me in life. And with spirituality, I think the one common theme I've read across all the books by like the top authors, okay, so I'm talking like Yogananda Paramhans, Krishnanand, Osho, people like that who I really look up to. The common theme is that it is like exercise, spirituality, the spiritual game, and it's a parallel game to your career, to your life. And the way to progress is regular meditation. They talk about that because, again, I speak about this a lot on the channel as well. Like, it biologically helps your body, cleans up your lungs, helps your brain develop. In fact, like it's kind of like how when you do bicep curls and your bicep is like becoming bigger, your brain becomes much more intense. And now I've been meditating for like 4-5 years. And I've seen the change in myself. My family's seen the change in me. You know, my loved ones have seen the change. My co-workers know things are much more calm, things are much more efficient, things are firing much faster. And I know it's a result of my meditation. So what is your whole take on this whole meditation wave that's taking over the world? Because people are actually, the way I look at it, people are using meditation as one of those tools now. Vishal's our common friend. He actually talks about how every single billionaire in the world has like this meditation habit now. So there must be some science to it. Must be something that's happening there. But from a quantum perspective, what do you think is happening, and what is your general take on like meditation?
So, what you just said, the CEOs and all of that, they're all walking, talking meditation now, which is a damn good thing. So, see, people need this, something to follow. And when you have the right role models doing it, you get a lot of behavior which follows. And what happens is it becomes a virtuous cycle. So when you have people doing this, isn't it much better than something which is like questionable and following that? So you talked about before we get into the quantum physics bit, which I have not even attempted to explain, but I think meditation today, I think in the last 15 odd years, has had a lot of neuroscience validation of how it affects brain to body, etc., etc. So I think that thanks to, I think, a lot of work that the Dalai Lama's Institute and all the neuroscientists who have kind of partnered with them to see the physical impact, the changes in the brain that happens for people who regularly meditate. So I think that has given a lot of confidence to the normally, let's say, skeptic only Western way of thinking, to saying that hang on, this is now good enough to integrate in our way of life, right? So for example, Silicon Valley many years back, they got onto the meditation bandwagon. I'm sure you've heard of Google, who created this whole search inside yourself program and all that many years ago, right? They look at it as a productivity hack. My point is that people might say, oh, but doesn't it take away from its core? I would say that if it encourages you to do something better than what you did before, so be it. 100%. So I think to me, no matter which platform you're coming from, if you're affecting positive change, fantastic. So, it doesn't matter why and what and, so I think to me, if good things get kind of, practiced and followed, I think that's important. I think today it's reaching this mass following, which is fantastic as far as I'm concerned.
100%. Coming back to the career coach side of things, hold on, wait, also the quantum
side physics of meditation. I think again it probably gets back into that whole thing of attention, right?
To yourself.
To yourself, to your surroundings, and therefore I'm saying helping reality manifest much better. Because if you remember waves, possibility, and particle being that physicality. So I think meditation actually allows you to
manifest.
Yeah, manifest. I'm sure you've heard of these experiments, and in fact, this was also covered in the What the Bleep and things like that, where they've had meditators literally change the pH level of water.
Damn.
Right. So they have measured this scientifically. This is not a woo-woo kind of a experiment, and I don't know if you're aware, but even one level of change in pH is massive. If you do that in the body, you'll die, right? So they've actually like 4 meditators together and focusing on, whatever, water container, and they actually changed the pH level. So that's the power. So obviously you're tapping into something very fundamental, which is where this quantum physics bit comes in, if you know what I'm
Which
trying
is
to
also ahead of modern science. It's way ahead of modern science as of now. Would you say that?
Sure.
Yeah. Like, I mean, people, like, if you say this to, like, the average person, they'll be like, what are you saying, man? Kya bol raha hai? But there is quantum physics behind it, man. So,
Sure. So I think, there's a quote from, there's a quantum physicist called Fred Alan Wolf.
okay.
He's one of the people featured in that documentary I was mentioning, What the Bleep Do We Know. So he says, like, the beauty of life is not in the know, but in the mystery, the K-N-O-W. And I think that's a beautiful, I use this quote in all my workshops that I do. When you are in the know, your mind is closed. You're not receiving. That antenna is
कि
not,
मेरे को सब कुछ पता है. I know
antenna
everything.
is not tuning in. But when I'm in the mystery, you're in the curiosity stage. And that to me is very important because the flow of energy changes. And I think to me, meditation allows you to step back and allow that flow and that curiosity and all those processes. And when it's a practice, like you were mentioning, anything that's a practice is only going to kind of do good for you. 100%. If it's a one-off, saying, oh, now I want to go meditate and become a superstar tomorrow, that's not the point. Exercising, the same thing. It's a ritual of exercise. It's more important than
One session.
Absolutely.
Yeah. My final question to you for this podcast is that if you can tune back into your career coach mode, but also kind of tie in that spirituality element, what would you tell an 18-year-old today that he should know in order to expand his mind, expand his career to the best of his capabilities from like a spiritual perspective as well? What spiritual advice would you give an 18-year-old for his career or her career?
So, most people have, this one role model. And I think there's a lot of passion there and all of that and people following it and all. But I think if I were to tell anyone starting off saying that, hang on, always triangulate your source of insight, which means that maybe your role model is saying this, but is there another perspective behind it? And I think to me, most people just get into it with blinders, follow, then learn in probably the most messy way. And some learn and they grow, but a lot don't. And then they kind of, blame their either the role models or more the verses blame themselves. So I think to me, this whole thing of cultivating this habit of pulling back and saying, hang on, is there another perspective to it? Maybe there's an opposing perspective. Why is it opposing? Does that mean that this is wrong? Or maybe it actually adds to that? I think to me that's a very important part of anyone entering the game of life. So that's what I would kind of honestly, get. So I hope it kind of ticked the boxes of spirituality
as well as
and
career.
Quantum physics, hopefully.
For sure. Did you enjoy the podcast?
Oh, nice. Good fun, man.
Yeah. So Abhijit is going to be on a lot of our episodes going forward. I'm going to link all his handles down below. Make sure you follow him. Anything else you want linked, like specifically?
No, I'm honestly active purely on Instagram.
Okay.
So that's what I do. So
Cool. So anyway, guys, if you enjoyed it, give it a thumbs up. Make sure you share it with your friends. Share it with other spiritual people. And until next time, guys, from Abhijit.
hey, man.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And myself, we'll see you later.